Goodness me, it's been what, 4-5 weeks since we've had this type of an episode right here on Pits To Podium on the Inside Line F1 podcast. But here we are again. It feels so good to be back with the race preview. And here's what to expect from this very episode, the Spa, or rather the Belgian Grand Prix preview that we've got right here. Firstly, we discuss what are we looking forward to the most in this weekend. Then, of course, what makes Spa so special even after all these years of coming here. Then a discussion about the McLaren versus Ferrari fight and why this one could actually be for the podium. Then, of course, we welcome back Sundaram, who comes back in with a stats preview. More on Fernando Alonso. And finally, the social media question of the week that we've got here today. Not the WEC, as I mentioned right here. It's the week. Typos happen. Let's not worry about that. Let's get straight into the episode for this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. Well, hello there, folks. Welcome back in. My name is Soumil Arora, host of The Driving Force on Disney Plus Hotstar, joined, like every single time, by Kunal Shah, who is the the former marketing head of the Force India Formula One team, who now works as a motorsport consultant for the VS Sport Network. And genuinely, Kunal, as I mentioned in the intro, it's only been 4 or 5 weeks, but I missed this a lot. And I'm so glad to be back doing this with you.
Absolutely, and I have to start by using the word which we use literally 2,500 times each episode. But you know, it feels so raw. I don't know if I'm going to say the right things, if we've hit record, are we getting the right audio and video frames as we need to? Because it's been a good break, of course. It's been a much needed break, given that we're going to have like 6 races in 7 weekends or 8 weekends or something like that here on, right? So it's like boom, boom, boom. All the racing that we didn't have in the last 3 weeks, we're going to have a double dose of that in the coming few weeks. But yes, it's lovely to be back. Lovely to be to the Spa-Francorchamps, you know. Fantastic circuit. And to me, this break, I think people sort of over-exaggerated the break literally, because there was almost no chatter whatsoever, no rumors. And guys, I'm sure you'll remember, you know, this, when we come to the Belgian Grand Prix, that's when the whole driver's silly season gets concluded, because, you know, in 2018 it was Ricciardo to Renault, in 2019 it was Ocon to Renault, Hülkenberg not finding a seat, and then Gasly Albon swap. And as we approach this weekend, there's, apart from, you know, an expected Fernando Alonso announcement, which we'll speak about later, it's literally been no rumors that kept us engaged either.
Yeah, which I think was a good thing for those like us. We can just take a little bit of time off and focus more on the outside world. But seriously, you're right about that. There was barely anything. I was just scampering about, looking on some really good websites on Formula One, thinking that, will there be something that comes up? No, nothing as such. Nothing on the junior drivers. I think it's mostly because the other championships and other sports took the center stage in that stage. But whatever, Formula One is back. And Kunal, a question that's been running in my mind over the last couple of weeks is, how do we manage with 2 Max Verstappen home races? Or I was thinking of calling it 2 Dutch Grand Prix in 3 weekends, but it's not the Dutch Grand Prix, it's the Belgian one. I know somebody will pounce on me if I said that. But again, it's 2 races out of 3 where we have a proper orange army, and the one race that we don't have an orange army, it's going to be a red one. It's craziness.
I'm excited to see how all of this drives into the one thing that I am really looking out for this weekend, and that's literally taking the step into the episode as well. And you know, typically Soumil and I will come up with, look out for this media fact or this on track and that driver, that team. But Soumil, I have one pick and nothing else. It is watching out for Max Verstappen taking the fight to Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, because time is running out. There are 12 races to go. Who knows if we will have 12 races or not, right? And literally speaking, it's just about Max turning the momentum in his favor again. We saw in the last couple of races before the summer break, all that stopped was his momentum, right? And I would love to see how Max grabs that challenge and then turns the momentum in his favor, because he is still in the fast car, arguably, right? He is still the driver in form. All that he needs to do is just get a good result in. And like Christian Horner said last race, wait for it, Max, the luck has to change. And will that luck change this weekend? That's what I'm actually going to look out for. And, it's 30 years to Michael Schumacher's debut this weekend. And I remember in 2000, when Michael Master car was the faster driver, a similar thing happened. He had a couple of crashes mid-season and suddenly the title battle tilted at that time, right? So let's see what happens with the whole Verstappen versus Hamilton battle this weekend.
You're actually right. While thinking of all these points of the preview, while thinking of all that's going to happen, I forgot the fact, which is a bit strange, but indicates it was a good break again, that Verstappen had crashed out in the last couple of races and that Red Bull actually need to get their elbows out. But this is fantastic. And it's not just Max. My point to watch out for would be in the other car, because Sergio Perez, remember, gets a grid penalty for, of course, changing the gearbox that got wrecked in that accident in Hungary. But along with Perez as well, there's Valtteri Bottas dropping down as well. And now these two drivers are under pressure. Reason being, Perez has only won, well, it's not only one race. He has won one, but since then the results have been a bit topsy-turvy, to say the least. And Bottas, of course, is always under pressure at Mercedes. I mean, that's a fact, right? Whenever you've got George Russell in there, that is bound to happen. So with both these drivers taking grid penalties, there's an air of excitement around what kind of a comeback drive they can put in. And knowing how much closer the midfield teams are as well makes this a little bit special. More on that in a second about why McLaren and Ferrari's fight could be elevated more. And Sundaram's also coming up with a lovely stat about Bottas that will shock you to the core, to be honest. But yes, that's more later on. But about this of Spa, right, Kunal? It's outstanding that at a circuit that has so many chances, we also get to debut one of the more quirky awards that Formula One has come up with. It's the Overtake Award. What's your take on that now?
Well, on one hand, we are praising Liberty Media for...
That gives it away in a way. If you're watching, if you're listening, I can tell you it was the most poker face you've ever seen. That's...
on one hand, we love Liberty Media for the way they've been able to market the sport and, the way they're bringing in newer people. And on that note, just before we recorded this episode, Netflix announced that there will be a season 4, or Formula One announced that Netflix will have a season 4 to Drive to Survive as well, right? We also need to applaud Liberty Media finding different ways to monetize the sport, right? So in terms of monetization, I think it's a master stroke. I mean, not really. Anyone working in the world of sponsorship would probably be like, let's just name a sponsor or name an award that that can be sold to a sponsor. It's just the whole gimmick that goes around it, because at the moment there is actually a reward for the highest overtaker as well, so to say, which is points, which is where the business of Formula One works upon. Just that it's not branded as presented by whatever the sponsors presenting the Overtake Award. And yes, the Overtake Award is also heavily skewed against the lower and the midfield team drivers. So all in all, if it's to, get more money to the sport and to sell it to a sponsor, so be it. I wouldn't really care. I'm just glad that there is like an official title that we will remember over the years for such an award to come. And should we be wondering if soon we will have a sponsor presents the FIA Formula One Drivers' Championship Award? I really hope not.
Oh, that time could be coming soon. Thankfully, it's not happened that badly in other sports, but I mean, considering the way we are going. But again, you're so right about it. It's so skewed in terms of smaller teams, but I say let the smaller teams have something. They barely have anything. I think it'll be good if Kimi Raikkonen or someone, I think it's Sebastian Vettel leading it, isn't it? It's good for Sebastian Vettel if he ends up winning it. But Spa is more than just about overtaking. Spa is more about the qualifying lap as well. And I know it's one of the wider circuits on the calendar, but there's a certain charm to it. And now, I know every single podcast or video or any race commentator will tell you this Spa is special, it's been around for a while. We all know that. But the question we generally have to answer here, Kunal, is that even though Spa has been around for such a while, why does that circuit have that extraordinary charm? And I think it can be nailed down to the danger of it. We just saw what happened to Jack Aitken, unfortunately, a few weeks ago. We know that Eau Rouge has become easier, Blanchimont has become easier, Pouhon has become easier, but there's this underlying element of danger that once it goes wrong, it can hit you hard physically as well. And I think that still makes Spa one of the more charming circuits of the modern day, even though it's just become bland. Everyone drives on it. Everyone has watched the race over here, not just in Formula One, but every other category for that matter as well.
Oh yeah, it's to me, it is definitely one of the most classic, iconic circuits. It's got corners that I would love to drive racing cars on, on a free day in life. Just luxury, I would say. It's got those long, flat out sections, corners that just keep going. And above all else, it's got this beautiful scenery around all the mountains and the natural surroundings that it has, So when the engines are literally running, you can hear them reverberate through the hills as well, right? So it's a great challenge for the drivers and the teams, as we already know, or if you don't, you're going to hear it all the time through the Grand Prix weekend. It's the longest lap of the season. There are lots of elevation changes, very high G-forces, Eau Rouge, and there's going to be this question, the meme that'll come up. That's not Eau Rouge, that's Radillon, and, yeah. So those things are the typical things to expect. But in reality, what are the key challenges? And Soumil, I'm glad you pointed out qualifying, because the big thing about qualifying is going to be who's going to give who the toe, because the toe is going to be a phenomenally powerful advantage to have in qualifying. So expect Bottas to give it to Hamilton, Perez to give it to Max Verstappen. Who knows? They might just get all the Alpha Tauri drivers up ahead as well to just to have that whole punch through the air for Max Verstappen. So that's of course the qualifying challenge, and the second challenge is the opening lap we'll see in the race. And we've seen opening lap incidents in the last two Grand Prix, right? Yeah. And it's a long lap. So if you have damage on the first corner or on corner, or at the Lecombe corner, as they call it, right? You're going to carry that damage through the whole lap back to the pits. And that will cost you a lot of time as well. So keeping it clean is going to be even more important for the drivers come Sunday's race day. And since we are talking about how iconic the circuit is, Soumil, and insight from the Mercedes F1 team. So the circuit is actually so iconic that this is one of the few venues where the teams and the engineers actually refer to the turns by their name rather than their number.
That's more like it. I hate the idea of calling a turn 17. Give it some character. Give it some name. What is turn 17? Am I going to ever remember turn 17? Unless it's something like turn 8 at Turkey. I won't. And that's not because... I'm a geek of motorsport, so it's a bit strange, whatever it is. But yes, it's good to see Spa being back. It's good to see this. And you talk about Lecombe. What about La Source? Ask Kimi Raikkonen and Max Verstappen about that. They've been having a little bit of trouble at that corner over the last few years. And Max, I distinctly remember, was it 2018 when he went down the inside of La Source? That is where all the problems began for him and eventually ended up crashing out. But it's an outstandingly challenging circuit where everything all comes together. And I just absolutely love the fact that we are coming back here after the break here. And remember, 3 wide at Lecombe, such a sight. It's happened, I think, over the last 3-4 odd years as well. So it's quite incredible to see what Spa is all about.
It is, and just one fact from me which really stands out is that 2021 will mark 100 years since Spa actually attempted to have the first race ever. It wasn't a Grand Prix race, it was a car race. It was back in 1921. That was what do you say? That was easy math to do. But in 1921, they actually organized the race. They didn't host it because they found just one competitor entering, the race. So interesting times. And then I think it was 1925 when Grand Prix racing actually started at the Spa-Francorchamps.
Time for a fun nugget here as well. I was doing some research on an endurance race on Spa when I found out that the casino in the Spa-Francorchamps is genuinely the oldest casino in the world. And I'm not kidding. And it's seen its fair share of parties with racing drivers and phenomenal figures across the world of motorsport go on till fairly late. So if you've got a chance of visiting Belgium at that time, maybe give that a shot if you've got some spare money in the bank. But yes, there is that. There is this about Spa. I think we've discussed enough of it because all the commentators and all the TV show hosts and everyone were talking about the same over the weekend. So let's move on to something else and let's talk a little bit about the midfield, right? McLaren versus Ferrari. And this time, Kunal, this could genuinely B, for a podium slot. We mentioned Bottas has been sent down, Perez has been sent down as well. So this literally means that, say, someone like a Lando Norris or maybe even Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc could have a genuine shot for the podium, maybe P3 or P2 as well if things work out that way.
And then what about Daniel Ricciardo? It's that long expected recovery or long expected settling that we are expecting from Daniel Ricciardo. So with, two of the four front running teams, Bottas and Perez having penalties, it will be exciting to see who can actually capitalize on their misery, right? And of course, watching to see how Perez and Bottas are even able to make a recovery. And let's remember the strategy is fairly open at Spa. It's easier to overtake as well at Spa. The DRS is extremely powerful, just like the toe is powerful as well. So it is. I think it was one of the races a few years ago when Lewis Hamilton actually went from being last two on the podium. Yeah. So it is something that's possible, and it'll be the battle or the comparison of the number two drivers if they're able to go from being at the back of the grid to somewhere on the podium, along with of course the Ferrari and McLaren drivers, because McLaren had a very unfortunate and an unlucky race in Hungary. So can they really bring it back is going to be the challenge, because they are certainly the quicker team, seemingly, right? But they have one driver scoring in bulk, whereas Ferrari have literally both drivers pushing the envelope forward for them.
That's exactly what the winners of the Pits To Podium Grand Prix prediction competition said on the special video we recorded with them. They said that they expect Ferrari to beat McLaren at the end of the year because of just this factor. But let me add another element to this drama, right? We all know that McLaren has struggled in a way in comparison to teams like Racing Point and the likes at Spa, because of course they normally had an engine deficit while being with Renault and of course with Honda, but now they've got the best engine on the grid, and Ferrari apparently have brought in an engine upgrade mid-season. And now you might be wondering, how has that happened? The engines are frozen. Well, they are frozen for 2021. You can decide when you want to bring your upgrade in. Ferrari didn't bring it at the start of the year. They are bringing it right now. So this means maybe you could see a little more power from Ferrari. And eventually, Ferrari versus McLaren, both on upgraded engines now. Maybe they could be fighting for, say, a position like P3. How exciting is that aspect? It literally rekindles memories of the late 2000s, except it's not for the race win. But it's still something.
It is, and it's just going to be so much more fun. Like I remember reading a few tweets of people that seeing McLaren and Ferrari battle for P3. They're not battling for the lead of the World Championships, but at the same time it's evoking a lot of nostalgia in people, right? So exciting times, and it's like I said at the start of the season, everything is going to happen so quick in the next 7 to 8 weeks. The battle for P1 and battle for P3. P1 in the Drivers' Championship, P3 in the Constructors' Championship. Absolutely what we are all going to be glued towards.
Okay, here then. It's time for the stats preview by Sundaram. You've been hearing to this and you've been listening to this for a long while now. I don't even need to preview it now. I just have to say it's the stats preview by Sundaram, and you know that quality is on the way. So here we go then.
All right, it's time for the second half of the 2021 Formula One season, and we are at the iconic Belgian Grand Prix. I have to admit there were quite a few interesting stats and numbers for this race, but it was very, very difficult for me to crunch it down and pick just a couple for this video. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and do the stats preview of the Belgian Grand Prix. First up, the major milestone going into this race is that it's going to be Daniel Ricciardo's 200th Grand Prix. He's going to be the 20th driver to enter that 200 race club. More interestingly, he's going to be just the third driver after Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg to start 200 consecutive races. Now, you're probably wondering where the hell are Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, and Kimi Raikkonen? Well, Sebastian Vettel, first of all, didn't start the 2016 Bahrain Grand Prix due to an engine issue. Fernando Alonso didn't. He missed a couple of races. He missed out an entire season after his first season with Minardi, and he missed the 2015 Bahrain Grand Prix after his massive crash in Australia. And Kimi Raikkonen, as you probably already know, he missed a couple of seasons in between because he thought of switching over to rallying and NASCAR for a couple of seasons before he made a comeback later on. We have to talk about Mercedes. So Spa is a Mercedes favorite track. They have been on a streak of podiums since 2013. But quite interestingly, Valtteri Bottas, who joined this team in 2017, has never been on pole, and he's never won this race. Even more surprisingly, he's led only one lap around this track, but that was back in 2014 when he was driving for the Williams team. Talking about the championship rivals for Mercedes, Red Bull don't have a great record here. They last won a race in 2014 at this particular track, and Honda, as an engine supplier, last won here in 1991. Max Verstappen, he's never led a lap over here, and his best race finish is third, which also happened last year. But keep all the numbers aside, I think they're going to be performing really, really well, and they're going to try and take that championship lead back at the end of this race, because that's very important. For the last 20 years, the constructor that's been leading the standings after the Belgium Grand Prix has been winning the title. So it's high stakes, but it's very much possible that the championship can still switch around because we have 12 more races to go. One person who's had a very unlucky past at the Belgian Grand Prix is Carlos Sainz. He's had just 1 point in 6 races over here, 3 of which were retirements, and he couldn't start last year's race due to a late exhaust issue. And I'm keeping a very interesting start for the end. It's a very historic one. So Jim Clark, the former world champion, he during the 1963 Belgian Grand Prix, he started the race from P8, and it was a wet race. So starting from P8, he went on to win that race, but he lapped everyone on the way except for the person in P2, which was Bruce McLaren, and he had a winning margin of 4 minutes and 54 seconds over McLaren. Even more surprisingly, he was struggling throughout the race with gearbox issues and had to drive one-handed while he kept the other hand engaged on the gear. Well, that was the stats preview of the Belgian Grand Prix. I'll catch you guys after the race.
Crazy stat right there. Bottas has only led one lap. One at Spa. This is, and also for Williams, I sometimes generally don't get how Sundaram gets these stats. It's just outstanding. Of course, by the way, cheap plug back to the mid-season stats review episode that we did right here on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. Check that out when this one is done, if you've got the time, of course. No pressure, no forcing, but I think you will have a good time watching that one. And speaking of stats, I hear you've got something special in the bag, Kunal.
Well, I think I have something silly because I can't do it the way Sundaram does. But so we all know by now that Max Verstappen and Red Bull are statistically disadvantaged. Yeah. Whoever is led after Hungary has gone on to win that year's title. Of course, the one caveat here is that there are more races post the summer break this season than there were before, right? But here's also why Lewis Hamilton is got the advantage, so to say, from a numerological point of view. Okay, number of laps of the race in Spa is 44. Number of gear changes per lap at Spa is 44. Okay, maybe Max tries it in 33. Who knows, And Soumil, this is probably why the organizers have changed the speed limit around the around the Zandvoort circuit from 30 to 33. They're trying to get numerology to work in Max's favor as well, right? But there is one thing that goes against Lewis Hamilton this weekend, which is Mercedes are following Netflix. Netflix is following Mercedes this weekend, because obviously Lewis is up for his 100th Grand Prix win, should that come this weekend, lest we forget. So that the ton of Grand Prix wins is what could happen this weekend.
But are they following just Lewis or the entire Mercedes team? Because there's someone in the Mercedes team that is also being followed, not by Netflix, but by, I think, French authorities, isn't it? No naming. Yeah, we're not going to tell who it is. I think you know by this stage. But yeah, following business is turning out to be a bit of a crazy one in Mercedes. Someone loves to follow around the stocks internally as well. That's what the authorities think. Not me, not my words. Let's see. I hope that everything is okay in that sense between Aston Martin and the person we're talking about right here. One very important figure. But yes, enough of that. Let's speak about a really fun part that could change up this weekend and toss it entirely on its head, Kunal. It is possibly going to be wet. I just love the prospect of it.
I'll tell you what I'm really looking forward to. A dry, wet race, or a wet, dry race, however you see it. We've not had that since many years. half of the circuit is dry, half of the circuit is wet. You could be on either set of compounds, and depending on which part of the circuit is wet or dry, you'll have an advantage. I'd love for that to happen, and Spa is actually one of those races where you can have a half wet, half dry circuit. So guys, if it is going to rain and you're doing the rain dance, just do half of it. So just half of the circuit will probably have. And I'm sure people have probably realized that, the silly quotient after the stats review on this episode has just gone up. But just, happy to be back, like I said, doing this and sharing all the silly passion that we have for Formula One.
Exactly. Let's see if the tide turns orange right here at Spa. But before we go, here's a fun question. It's our social media question of the week. And it comes up by Angry Man E. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But the question is an interesting one, Kunal. I haven't quite told you this before, so this will be a bit crazy. Who needs to pay money for crashing into others? Now, it's genuinely a fun one. I always wondered when I was younger. So who pays? In junior formula, as far as I know, drivers are sometimes ruthless. If you crash into them, they will send the bill back to your place, don't they? But I don't think that's how it works in Formula One.
No, I don't think that's how it works in any motorsport for that matter. You bang, you pay, literally. Yeah. If it's your car, if you're banged into, it's still your damages that you need to pay for. So it is from the team's crash budgets. Every team keeps a certain money aside for rebuilding their cars and spares and so on. So that's where it goes from. I know that with the whole budget cap, there is this chat about, rivals need to pay us for damages they've caused. It's a great argument to have in theory, but I don't think it's practically feasible to do that. So I think it's just better to keep things the way they are. Admit that you are in a sport where there is a danger that you could have both cars being hit, multiple times at a weekend or 23 times a race. You just have to live with that fact.
The reason why it's not workable in real life, what if Haas makes one tiny braking error and hits 3 cars? Are they going to survive? No, they're not. They're going to go into administration. So just doesn't work that way. But I've genuinely heard a couple of stories of junior category drivers sending a bill to other drivers' places for hitting them. It is just amazingly silly. But that's just the world of motorsport for you, folks. I hope you enjoyed listening and watching to this episode. You know that he will be back on Sunday evening American time, by the way. We record very late. But yes, we'll be back right here with the Belgian GP review right here on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. You know what to do. Thank you so much for being a part of this, Kunal, and we shall see you in a bit.
Thank you, Soumil. Enjoy the race, gentlemen and ladies, and we shall see you in a bit.
Bye-bye.